This interview is with Steve, a muso and instrumental teacher who craves the company and vibrancy of his city and music scene here in Melbourne. Lockdown was hard for Steve, who was a single man that lived alone in his apartment throughout this time, and we discuss how being cooped up in his flat without the opportunities normally available to meet his social needs affected him. You can hear a few glitches in this interview, which aptly represents the tech issues faced by Steve, a Generation X man as he tried to teach clarinet and saxophone via Zoom to his students. We touch on how the digital world does not suit him and many members of that generation who still make up a large part of the experienced workforce of Australia, and how he felt incompetent doing what he has been successfully doing for decades. Steve voices his concerns about the impact of COVID on his beloved, once thriving music scene in Melbourne, and echoes the worries of many musicians, performers, artists, roadies, and anyone attached to the arts who share his sadness and worry that things may have changed forever. In saying that, there is a little plug for his trio that performs each week in St Kilda. So Melburnians, make sure you get out there and support live music over the summer months at least, while we can. Okay, here we are with Steve, and this is the 7th interview for this podcast series. So welcome to Lockdown Stories from Inside, Steve, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
It's a pleasure, an absolute pleasure.
So whereabouts do you live in relationship to Melbourne, Steve? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the suburb that you're living in or you've lived in, and how far away from Melbourne it is.
I'm in Altona, which is in the west of Melbourne. It's just past Williamstown. It's quite an industrial area. It was purely industrial in the 60s. It has been gentrified somewhat since then, and a lot of development has gone on over that time. It's about 30 kilometres out of Melbourne, by the beach.
Okay, great. And so is that in the west, is it?
It's in the west, yes, just past Williamstown.
Nice, yeah, which is always that real sort of industrial part of Melbourne. It's certainly coming up in terms of house pricing and everything nowadays. Sort of a little bit more about the culture of your suburb. Is there like a sort of dominant presence culturally? Is there many multicultural influences, or is it sort of quite gentrified?
It's the older population that's here is very white Australian. There's a bit of a European influence. But the surrounding suburbs, there's a lot of Polynesian people, and they sort of, you see them a lot at the beach and so on. But generally, it's a pretty European sort of population. Not a lot of Asian people at all.
Yeah, right. It's interesting for me to notice these things as I go through these questions with different people. I live in the East, so there's a lot of people from the Asian countries that have made their homes in the East, but not so many in the West. So it's an interesting little sociological observation to see where people from different cultures gather. So what do you think the main political inclinations are in your suburb or your region?
It's a safe Labor seat. Julia Gillard used to actually live around the corner from me.
Okay.
So that's my daughter, when she was 10, went to go trick and treat and knock on a door, but the federal police wouldn't have it. Look, there's, it is hard to tell. I live in a flat. There's a new tenant. So shares the car park with an Australian flag hanging outside of his thing. So I'd imagine he seems a little bit right wing. So there is an element, while it's a safe Labor seat, there's an element of that One Nation-esque sort of philosophy around it.
Okay, yeah. Now, would you like to explain just to overseas listeners what the One Nation Party sort of represented?
Look, it was an ex-conservative, our main conservative party, the Liberal Party, an ex-candidate just went berserk with the xenophobic, pro-Donald Trump-esque type of things. Very, very angry woman, formed a party and that really appeals to the white, disenfranchised older male. Why do these different groups get welfare and I don't, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, really resonates with a lot of people. My feeling is very, very dangerous sort of philosophy.
Yeah, One Nation Party certainly stirred up a lot of controversy in Australia, particularly given the fact that we were at the time that they were coming into power, or they weren't ever in power, but coming into being a political party with some influence, weren't they, in Queensland? We were really opening our doors to so many different cultures in the country. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing to notice in Altona, where you live in the West, that there is potentially some of that energy sort of gathering there a little bit. But you think and Julia Gillard, for overseas listeners as well who may not know, Julia Gillard was our Prime Minister at one stage. I can't actually remember the exact dates that she was Prime Minister, but
2008-ish, around that 2000, around that. We had many prime ministers over that
yes,
period.
That's right. Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard. There was a really interesting thing that happened within the Labor Party at that point, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So do you think your neighbourhood in Altona would be classified as predominantly working class or a bit more white collar?
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
It's yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So yeah, socioeconomic status is the next question we're just going to touch on. So given the fact that it's more of a working class area than it was an industrial area in Altona, do you think your neighbourhood would be described as middle class or sort of in more low? Yeah,
for the main. There used to be along the beachfront. I'm about 10 minutes away from the beach. There used to be these little weatherboard wooden shacks, little nice little places. People lived there. They sort of like not a huge house, but on quite a large block of land. And those are being developed into really big, glass and concrete beachfront sort of residence. So there's that element of
interesting,
sort of upwardly mobile with fancy cars, and the big glass window at the front where you can see in, and very big television sets and all of that sort of stuff.
all the paraphernalia.
So there's a lot of that, but further back from the beach, say for where I am, I'm in a unit, a flat, and it's back to Muso Town for me. So
interesting. So you're saying that your socioeconomic status would probably fall into that sort of middle bracket as well, or middle to lower bracket. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. So talking about your living arrangements, let's discuss what your situation is. Where so you're living in a unit, and who do you live with? Are you on your own, or do you live with a family?
I'm with my daughter. She's 22 now. So adult daughter, just the two of us, has been that way for 16 years.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So she's 22 and you've been living in the unit that you're in now for 16 years? Oh, lovely.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, so there's the two of you. So how much space do you have, Steve, in the unit that you live in?
Well, there's probably quite a lot, but I've got a lot of stuff. So I've got there's a lot of instruments and a lot of things. I seem to have a fondness for things that need a lot of gear, like scuba diving and photography and music, recording. So it's cluttered, but it's good. There's a dining table, lounge room, kitchen.
So you've got two bedrooms, a lounge room, and a bathroom, and are you on the top floor? How many floors is your
ground level?
Ground level. Okay, yeah. Great. Okay, so what was a typical weekday like for you before the pandemic came into being a thing?
Anything but typical, because it's pretty but I spent pretty much all my time not here, not at home, not in the flat. I work at a school a couple of days, or a couple of schools. Yeah, it's a bit of teaching. I work at a gym. I play a lot of music. I think that's it. Those three things. Yeah, and so I'd be getting up, coffee machine, on the train, and coming back, cooking dinner. Yeah, if I wasn't playing at night, so I spent most of my time out of the flat. Really, so either eating here or sleeping.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It was just a base for you, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And that's been your lifestyle for about 16 years? Is that kind of where it was?
Yeah.
Interesting. So is there much sort of, I'm guess going back to the living arrangements for a minute, you're in a unit, but is there much space that you sort of occupy outside your unit, or is there anywhere for you to go?
Yeah, there's a lawn area at the front. I don't drive. They've got a carport. I've got a carport which I didn't use. So yeah, but basically I'm just if I'm here, if I'm at home, I'm inside usually.
Yeah, otherwise you're out. Otherwise you're out doing and you're either teaching music or you're working at a gym or you're playing music in the scene.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a pretty nice lifestyle. And so let's go into, I guess, how that changed. I guess there's a few different areas there that we can focus on. So how did your life change with the stage 3 and 4 restrictions in Victoria due to COVID?
Well, the first thing that went was the gym work. And that was, when it first, I work at the City Baths, which is run by the Melbourne City Council. And they were, I think rightly so, particularly in hindsight, very conservative with closing down. They closed down before it was mandatory to do so. But it made real sense because it's an old building, the ventilation is not ideal, and no one knew. And so that went first. And then, of course, the stage 3 came, so it was, you cooped up. And I found that really difficult. Teaching music via a computer link, as you can see, I'm not really fond of computer links at the best of times. I found that really stressful. Particularly I had no idea. But I consider myself quite good at what I do.
Can I just interrupt you and ask you, what do you teach? What do you actually teach musically? Are you an instrumental teacher? Or?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I teach saxophone and clarinet.
Right. Yes.
I'm at a couple of schools, and I basically teach clarinet at one and saxophone at the other. And the way I operate and have always done, and the way I get by is that the student or group comes in and we work out what we're going to do or what they need help with, and it goes from there. That doesn't seem to happen via video link. I had to plan basically like a presentation almost, and it was. It's not what I'm good at. So
sure, absolutely. And I think it's maybe important to note here, Steve, that you're of the generation that didn't grow up using computers, and it's a very recent introduction into your sort of experience, isn't it? And I think we talk about a lot of different things in these interviews, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that for people from, say, Generation X onwards, that the digital world is something that it is difficult to navigate. So thank you for pointing that out. And also, just as an instrumental teacher, I can imagine, not being able to be tactile with it. It's incredibly difficult. And so did you find that the students that you were teaching in this particular way were engaged at all in the learning? Or
look, they were fantastic. They tried, and we talked about it a lot. And particularly, see, my job, you'll have the same student year after year. It's not like a classroom teacher where you may or may not connect with them later on. So I've got a lovely group of year 10 girls who are playing clarinet. They're all friends, and they were there every time we set up a meeting. They were there. And we talked about it. We talked about how it's difficult because we really enjoy playing together. We'll often do, all sorts of things. And that sort of stuff doesn't happen. We really miss playing. They loved showing up to the band after school. That didn't happen. And like you say, it's the tactile, being able to see their hands and the audio quality. You can't hear any of the nuance. So, I mean, we got through it, but, everyone realises it's not ideal.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So there was the element of the teaching element of your life that was thoroughly compromised, and you were doing that. How many days a week were you having to do that, Steve?
2 days. 2 days.
2 days. Okay. Yeah. And then, so you do 2 days of the teaching, and then your work at did you say it was the city baths that you?
Yeah.
Okay. There. Yeah. Beautiful. So that was not operating.
Right.
So you were at home for the other days of the week that you would normally be out, and then of course let's talk a little bit about the lack of music and the lack of performance, and how that really impacted you.
Oh, that was really hard. In that I was doing quite well. Sort of I work in my own trio. I had 3 regular gigs a week, and we're getting all sorts of other stuff. And I basically play a lot of jazz, and particularly in the first lockdown, people were doing all this online sort of collaborations, and the split screen thing doesn't work with what I do. I really respond to an audience. I found I was really glad I was watching the ABC Arts program, The Mix, and Claire Hooper, the comedian, was saying how she really didn't like it. It was the first time I'd heard anyone else saying how everyone else was, it's great, yeah, we get to do this, we get to do that, and and you'd see them doing all sorts of stuff, and during the lockdown,
trying to rally the troops and trying to keep people's enthusiasm.
That just didn't happen with me.
No.
So it's good. Okay, so I'm not the only one.
Sure. Okay, so that's interesting to notice as well when you think about it, because I know there's someone that I've talked to on this podcast was saying that it was really important for her to feel the positivity from the from the society. So everybody's different in the way that they respond, and for you're actually saying it was really nice to hear some truth and some honesty around how this is actually a bit shit. And that's fantastic to also acknowledge that certain people need just that authentic expression of this isn't really working for me.
I did hear though someone saying that the type of people who find it most difficult are the extroverts. And that's not just because I'm a performer, but it's people who crave human contact. And I'd notice on the days that if I didn't talk to somebody, face to face, even as the bloke at the shop, or because my daughter went, and she sort of stayed with her friends in Coburg, because it's another story. So I was basically here by myself, and I just how much that affected my mood. I really know. So I try and make a point of just with him going out, talking to somebody, and that's all it had. It didn't have to be any great friendship or anything like that, because you could do that by phone. But that was it's part of, I think, all humans. I don't know how much it affects everybody, but it's certainly affected me.
I absolutely agree with you, and you're absolutely spot on there, because I talked to somebody during that time. I was very depressed during lockdown, and I would probably be considered an extrovert. I think we have always a little bit of both in us, but I agree. And that person that I was talking to said, he'd heard that it was the extrovert. Watch out for your extroverted friends; they're going to really suffer through this, because we get our our vitality and our energy from dealing with people, and we get so much, we get revitalized by that. And so for people that are more introverted and actually don't mind kind of, you know, regrouping and going within and inwards a lot more, lockdowns, you know, of course they're going to still have an impact, but it's not maybe as extreme as it would be for extroverted people. Yeah. So just moving into the relationships section of the interview. I'm gathering that you are single, or you have been single for this year.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so how did that feel? I know you've mentioned that you were feeling pretty isolated, particularly because your daughter has, had made that decision that she needed to be around a friend. And that's absolutely understandable. And yeah, how did you feel during lockdown as a single person? Did it become, I guess, more prevalent, or did things kind of bubble to the surface for you around that area, or?
I don't think so. Look, particularly the first one, I think just looking back, it's really hard to. It seems so different. It, I almost feel like it wasn't me, that person that was, So, and it didn't. Yeah, that didn't seem to bother me. It was the. Like I said, I didn't enjoy it at all. My routine became very, very different. My body clock. I'm such a night owl by nature, but I try to get up, particularly on the teaching days, that sort of reset everything. I'd go and turn on the television and watch the Premier's daily update. That became sort of a thing.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? Yeah, it really did. It became sort of like, it was very 1984, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, during the first lockdown, there was the World Health Organization, coming on. It seemed like one of those bad sort of things that you see when there's a television on a science fiction film.
Yeah, totally.
Pandemic. Yeah, the robots have taken over.
Yeah.
So that was it, and okay. So the first lockdown, I really did feel like we came out of it far too soon compared to the other states. And you think, okay, but these people know what they're doing, and I was really glad to get out. And I remember sort of doing a little graph. I'm good at doing graphs, just sort of working out and being optimistic that okay, there was a minor spike, and it did for a tiny bit when we opened up the first time. Looked like there was a slight downward trend, which in a day or two, just disappeared completely. And I was sort of, and then when that second lockdown came, and it came, in a few stages, but then all of us, it was the night of the curfew was announced. That was, oh my goodness, that, and it felt really bleak.
Yeah, it did. For you particularly, because you weren't allowed out. You were not allowed out after, and it was, from memory, it was 8 o'clock, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was midwinter, and very, very gloomy.
Yeah, it was. It was so. It felt so restrictive, didn't it? Where you sort of felt like you were going to get told on, or if you went out after 8, there'd be this huge consequence.
Yeah. And so I watched a lot of television.
Yeah. And for you, I guess for you too, as a person that lives alone, pretty much, a single person who has I'm imagining a lot of friends and a lot of community around you from being in the music scene a lot, and that's where you would normally meet your community would be in person, out playing music, listening to music, being in the scene. You were, that was just cut off all of a sudden, wasn't it? So, and I'm going to make an assumption here based on my life experience and having lots and lots of friends that are men. I'm imagining that the phone calls maybe weren't sort of something that you did go to as much as maybe myself as a woman who just jumps on the phone all the time. Would that be a fair assumption to say?
That would. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you really were quite isolated in that way.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Did it, how did you end up meeting your needs for sort of connection, intimacy if relevant, or just kind of that real more,
I
yeah, just, yeah.
look, I basically didn't.
Yeah, you just didn't. Sure.
Yeah, so it was just I was look, particularly once that the trend of, you know, the outbreak started to reveal itself, that things were getting better.
Mm.
There's one sort of a more of a colleague was putting on Facebook every day a little optimistic message. That the number of, look, there's so many cases, when they started getting less and less, particularly on average, every day he was saying, this is the average today. We're doing really well. Let's all keep going. And I'd always click a like on it. And some people, there's a whole for every like you got some really vicious comment, from
Yes.
someone else, blaming someone for it, a conspiracy theory, all sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I look, and I got a little bit of comfort almost from some of the, people blaming 5G networks and, that sort of thing. That I'm always fascinated by conspiracy theories. They yeah. While they're very dangerous, I find them hilarious. Yeah.
Well, sometimes, yeah. I mean, the whole idea around conspiracy theories is that it was actually a term made up by the CIA, according to whatever historical documents we can trust, to basically discredit anyone that was trying to question the narrative around the JFK assassination. So, conspiracy theories in itself, just even the term conspiracy theory, is such a loaded term and has become more so during this pandemic. So yeah, it was an interesting time. I suppose this is sort of a really good segue into going into the mental health section of the interview as well. So you've been describing how you felt over the course of the pandemic. At the start, when you were introduced to the idea of coronavirus, but maybe we can expand on that a little bit. Like, in a nutshell, how did you go in terms of I think we need to remember in this interview that we're in December now, and we've been out of lockdown for about 2 months or so, and it is starting to become a little bit hazy, even more so. But we're all in a bit of a time warp, weren't we? But if you can kind of remember some kind of, as you say, a graph-like trajectory on how you went in your mental health from the beginning to the sort of middle section, and then when things got really tight and restrictions got really tight in the middle of winter, and then we're sort of coming out of it. Talk us through your process and how you're feeling now.
I'm feeling a lot better now.
I bet.
But and again, it is hazy. Look, I think I'm finding that really difficult to recall.
I think that's a really relevant thing to note as well, because I feel like this is where I wanted to really get these interviews done before the end of the year, because human beings forget. We forget how we and the struggles that we've gone through.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but I think, look, because it feels so different. Look, I'm just looking out my window. It's a sunny day out there. So we have longer days. But that was, okay. So the first lockdown, we were sort of autumnish and going. I remember feeling it was a drag. The first one, it's a drag. I didn't like it, but the big thing for me, I think it was the stress of feeling incompetent about the work that I was doing, and missing the playing, missing the contact with people. I would get to the end of that second teaching day, and that was the teaching done for the week, and feel this enormous sense of relief. Oh boy, and but being that sedentary lifestyle, I put on nearly 20 kilos.
Oh my
And
God, that's a
yeah,
significant amount of weight to put on in that time, isn't
yeah,
it?
and
Yeah.
it's not muscle.
Yeah, I
But
think that's everybody's done that. They've eaten their way through COVID and had that sedentary
um,
lifestyle. So
and I sort of realised, and I cut down my portion size because I factored in the amount of exercise that I'm not doing. But it wasn't that. It was that I'm usually on my feet all the time, all day, every day, and so it was that, and it's just yeah. So it's slowly coming off, but it's taking, it's hard. I'm an older guy, so
yeah,
um,
well,
but
relevant. It
yeah,
is relevant, and especially like
yeah,
weight gain and fluctuations in weight are totally relevant at that point. Yeah.
yeah. So that was I found a bit alarming because I didn't expect that to happen at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that would have played into some feelings of yeah,
yeah,
worry.
yep. So that was in the look. It went sick, but I was almost glad that the second lockdown was so harsh, in that it said like it was more likely to actually have an effect. Yeah, that okay, we've got to wear a mask. You've got to stay in. Don't go out past 5 kilometres past your place. 1 hour of exercise or 1 hour outside of the house a day. In all of the places that closed, all that interaction that they stopped, at least it felt like, and then when it became obviously effective that it was working, that made a huge difference. So
yeah, to your mental health as far as
yes,
trusting
yeah,
the
yeah.
process. Yeah, right.
That I could see that things were getting, it was obvious that things were getting better. And being back at school was fantastic. Back at the gym now, and that's very quiet. That's very, very different to the way it used to be.
Yes, it
It's
is.
slowly coming back. So
Yeah, so yeah, you kind of things are trickling back, and but in those darker days of winter when you weren't at work, you weren't doing face-to-face teaching, but the thing that kind of got you through was seeing that these really tight restrictions and these really difficult social control measures were actually getting you further towards reaching that normality again. Did you do anything? Did you feel like out of pure desperation or need, that you did anything against the rules? In terms of the restrictions.
no, I didn't. I just thought, if everyone does it,
Yeah.
I was pretty good. Yeah, I had the map about where 5 kilometres is around your thing, and so the big circle. Trouble is, half of mine's over the beach, just in the bay.
Yeah,
But,
you can only go one direction.
yeah, and I got just before the second lockdown, I got a new bicycle and a really good road bike. I can't drive, and so I'd worked out like a couple of sort of roads that I can go up and down, and sort of made a little circuit, but it got a bit boring. And when they finally did drop that 5 kilometre radius of movement, I almost felt like I was going into the forbidden zone when I crossed it. I felt quite popular. It's like, I can go past this set of traffic lights.
Yeah.
Naughty me. So I did comply with it. And I really don't like wearing a mask. I find it, I get a really dry throat, which makes me cough and makes people think I'm dying.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of a vicious circle because you feel like you sort of feel like you're sick.
But I do keep it on, and even now, we have to wear public transport, and I think that's a really sensible thing because you're in a carriage with people you don't know if you're there for quite some time, and so
So
I get really annoyed. Sorry.
No, sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, you get really annoyed when you see the people wearing it like a chin strap. It's thinking, well, I'm wearing a mask, and
tokenistic. Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing to focus on. So was the face mask for you sort of the most intolerable and difficult kind of part of those rules and regulations that we had to follow, or was there something greater?
Well, there was that restriction of 1 hour a day outside.
Okay.
And again, being in Melbourne, winter, there's not that much sunlight at all, and so that whole thing about the vitamin D and all that affecting your mood. Well, if that was true,
Yeah.
I certainly felt just being cooped up. Whether it's anecdotal or not, I felt cooped up, and I remember going for a walk, do some shopping, come back. I was 10 minutes past the hour, thinking, "Oh no, what?" I mean, that wasn't really policed at all, but I tried to stick to it. Yeah, it was a very strange time for me. Very strange.
Well, it was a strange time for everybody, but yeah, it's really interesting to hear what parts of it were really triggering for people for the different reasons. Were you worried about your own health, physical health, not just mental health, but physical health? And were you worried about, the potential of catching COVID as such? Is that something that played on your mind?
Not at all. I guess so. When we finished the first lockdown, I was meant to start at school, and the Monday of that week, I woke up with a sore throat. Thinking, oh no! And it didn't feel like anything type of sore throat I would have had before. And I thought, look, I should get tested. I rang both the schools, and they both really supported. No, just get tested, you'll be right. So when the thing that I was most scared of was ending up on the news as the typhoid Mary of old Melbourne town. That I was the one that caused this another outbreak. So that was
interesting. Yeah. So you're more worried about the impact on other people.
Yeah. I'm reasonably fit and healthy, and so I'd be really unlucky if I did get that. I would be really unlucky for it to have to be. But giving it to other people, that was the thing that got me. So and getting tested, as soon as I got the test, I felt emotionally a lot better. Like, oh, good, I'm glad I did that. I've done the right thing.
Okay.
So and it was just a sore throat.
Absolutely. Most of us have had those. Hey, do you know anyone, just as another little side question, because I don't know if overseas listeners are in fact listening, but if they are, they would possibly not know that in Victoria, even though we were going through some pretty intense social restrictions and regulations, and our numbers were comparatively bigger than the rest of Australia, I don't know I don't know anyone really who has been affected by COVID. So it's a really interesting, untangible kind of thing to deal with, because we could hear that the numbers were going up. We saw the stats. We were listening to the reports. We sort of heard whispers of people that were affected, but I don't know if you can attest to this, but I personally don't know anyone who's had COVID. I have one friend who knows someone who had COVID and got over it in 2 weeks and but has still got some remaining symptoms of that. But that's the only person I know of. So what about you?
No, well, your COVID card's better than mine. I don't know anyone who I haven't heard of anyone.
That's the interesting part about all of this, isn't it?
Yeah. So we talk about our numbers here. At the worst, there was 723. I think it was 723 cases a day, and that was the bleakest day. My sister lives in Philadelphia, so she's at Penn State, and there are thousands of people getting.
Yes,
we went into lockdown when it was getting in the hundreds.
Yeah,
that was the panic stations for us. They would give anything to have 700 only 700 cases a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I don't know anyone who's had it, or anyone who knows anyone who has.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like. Just getting back to that little dabble into the conspiracy theory part of this, which this program isn't about, but really valid and interesting discussions to have around what really has been a big focal point, this whole COVID and COVID testing pandemic. But, you know, in our situation, we haven't really got the tangible expression of that, you know, that. So that's where a lot of it can lend itself to a lot of theories around, is this actually real? Is this actually, what are we actually dealing with? And are these social change measures necessary? So, yeah. And I haven't asked that question to everybody, but I thought that was a really nice little segue to go into some kind of acknowledgement of that. So, yeah, getting back to the mental health part of the interview. So, you know, what were some of the things that you did to cope with the feelings that you were having in those darker hours or darker times during the lockdown?
Well, I certainly drank more.
You and the rest of Victoria, definitely.
I know. So, so it's bizarre. I was watching so much television, and that became a thing almost. I got a little bit hooked on a reality show of all things. It's not really that. On SBS, a thing called Alone, where it's just the right thing to get into when you're in lockdown, where they plonk someone in a really remote part of the world, and they've just got to survive with 10 items and things. And it was, oh God, I've got to see what's happening to Andy today, and all that became a thing. I got and the quiz shows. I was watching I've always liked sort of pub trivia and things like that, and so I was watching The Chase, these terrible shows.
It's actually.
I wonder, will it be the governess today? No, not that much. No, I was just there for the questions, and so that was it. And I'm lucky that I play music, so there's a few little things I could work on. I built a little sort of gym area in my carport during the second lockdown. So there's
good on you.
And that made a big difference. And so I was, while you're not allowed out of your house for anything more than an hour, if the weather was okay, I'd be out there just doing some stuff. It was okay, but it's so boring compared to being in a gym environment where your friends and people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a poor substitute, but good on you for doing that. So you had some sort of projects that you could work on both physically and intellectually and with the music as well. And I think television, it's a fairly common occurrence, and the drinking. So what I guess the next sort of question that I wanted to ask you is that it's a bit of a numbers thing. It's something I've been asking everybody, but on a scale of 1 to 10, can you rank your lowest state of mental health over the time of the lockdowns, 1 being the lowest, and then again, what was your highest ranking?
I reckon around that time when the numbers were going, second lockdown, we were getting up to 500, 600, 700 cases a day. You had no idea that was going to be the peak. It was very, very gloomy Melbourne winter, and we were only allowed out 1 hour a day. I don't reckon I was that bad. I didn't like it. I wasn't. A scale of 1 to 10. I have definitely felt worse in my life with other, significant events happening and so on. But maybe a 4.
Yeah.
Compared, So that's it. And you want the high point as well?
Yeah. Like, what did you get up to? Did you get up to sort of fairly high moods or not really?
Yeah, I reckon so. Once. Okay, so I ordered this gym equipment online, and one of the things was you had to assemble it, so I spent the day doing that. That felt pretty good. I had to clean out the carport, made the area, made that feel good. Those sort of things. That's I wasn't ecstatic or anything like that. Not like like playing a really nice gig and having nice people around, and like maybe an 8. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds about right from what you've said. Yeah, it's a pretty good bandwidth. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So basically, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about so what your observations or maybe concerns, opinions on the impact of COVID-19 are on not just you, but your family, and maybe you could talk a little bit about what you've observed with your daughter and how
yeah, sure.
she's kind of felt about this whole thing and her future, and then
Yeah,
broaden it out to the Australia and your friends and the
yeah,
world.
okay. Um, Look, I really feel for the younger people
Mm.
that, I teach some year sevens and they've spent the whole year, basically not being at school and walking around with masks. And you see children. Um, that's something that's going to live with them. Look, let's assume that everything gets just, there's a vaccine and Donald Trump's miracle happens and all of that. But this never happens. We've seen the end of this. And so if we assume that, this year is going to have an impact on a lot of those younger people. So much. I'm glad I feel it's over. I'm glad I feel like that. I'm making the most of it. The big concern I had and still have is the places I play at and the way that I perform. Luckily, this afternoon, it's a tiny little place in St Kilda. They managed to get through the whole thing. But one of the better venues, a place called the Dogs Bar, uh, I was a regular there. They uh, they closed the other day.
Oh, no.
So there's a huge and the bloke who was running that, Gavin, he'd been putting on live music for decades. Every night I was there on a Saturday. Three bands would be playing on any
Yeah.
given time. And everyone talks about the vibrancy of St Kilda and everything else. It wasn't through the council. It wasn't through any arts grants or anything like that. It was that suburb and all the life that goes on there. That came from people putting on music, taking the risk.
Yeah.
That's gone now.
Yes. Yeah.
And only because I went through because the landlord just wouldn't budge.
Mm.
And that's and even during the lockdown, I was wondering, are these places going to open? Another place which I play at has opened again, but they're not putting music on at the moment.
Yeah.
And so the three regular venues I work at, only one got through it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
Gosh.
those places took generations to a lot of stuff has to happen before a place starts to really fire up. And they're gone.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I know there's a lot of COVID fallout, especially for the arts and music scene. And that's really what made Melbourne great, So I totally hear your worries there. Yeah. How's your daughter feeling about sort of future job prospects and potential travel and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Look, she's just similar personality to me. Just grin and bear it. Not she was basically working in hospitality to get by. Doing the uni hospitality thing. She's did okay financially through the whole thing. I'd say, "Do you need any money?" And she'd say, "Do you need any money?"
Yeah.
She actually did better than me.
Actually, I'll just stop you there. Can you just tell people who may not be familiar with, the sort of supports that was in place that we had? So, how did you survive economically through COVID?
It was when they made the announcement. So our Prime Minister said they'll put this job keeper subsidy. They've got a nice little rattle to every little sort of gimmicky name. Job keeper. I go, oh, good. That'll be good because I've lost more than a third of my income. Yeah, oh, good. Yeah, that's fine. And you'll get a payment. Oh, good. That'll be handy. I didn't qualify for any of that.
Why not? Why not?
Because the Melbourne City Council, all my gym work, there's something about that they don't qualify council contractors, which is technically I am, don't qualify for the JobKeeper.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So there was that. And look, the music stuff, that's not really employment.
No, that's like,
that's
if you can get a gig,
say.
that's great, but you're not going to be getting any coverage from the government by that. Yeah.
No. So, they're quite happy to reap the benefits of all the income that playing music generates. But that's another gripe.
No, it's good. It's all valid. It's pop it in the mix.
So the gym work and the music work went, and so I thought, apply for Social Security. Oh, okay. So hours on the phone.
Welcome to Centrelink.
Yeah, and eventually, 6 hours, on hold.
Yeah,
and that's not an exaggeration. And then eventually, because I was still receiving income from the teaching, I'm like about $1 over the threshold that you can receive any assistance at all.
Yeah.
So I thought, I can't. So they then had this thing where you could draw on your superannuation. So I did that. So
you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and that got me by. Things aren't great, but they're getting better. So,
yeah. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? Thank you for sharing that information. It's really, I was talking in another podcast to a person that also works in the arts, who's a playwright and director and a podcaster as well. And she was talking about straddling the low socioeconomic demographic and how that looks. She's actually on a pension. Anyway, you can hear her interview on the podcast series. Do you want to do a little plug for while we're at it, for your venues and gigs or bands or anything like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Only one at the moment.
Yeah.
It's in a couple of hours. Really lovely little. When I mean little, it is tiny. Place called Surabaya Johnny's. It's in Blessington Street, St Kilda. And we're there every Saturday. I think we kick off at 4.
Beautiful.
And look, we've finally found a niche in that again, this is crazy, isn't it? Because we perform outdoors. It was lousy weather last week. We went back inside.
I know, because Melbourne, you never know, even in summer.
Yeah, that's it. But people move into this vibrant suburbs in Kilda, and then they complain about the noise.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And so there's a council regulation that if music's played outside, you can't use amplification. Amplification can't be outside, so you can't have speakers pointing outside. So,
okay.
So we perform totally acoustically, and I make a point of being louder than anybody else.
Is that with your sax?
Clarinet and voice.
Fantastic.
My father was a radio announcer, and I wish I knew how he taught us all of this. But my brother and I and my sister have we potentially very, very, very loud speaking voices.
Excellent. Perfect for performance.
Yes.
And so your band is called
Steve Colebrook Trio.
Oh, the Steve Colebrook Trio. Okay, beautiful. Yeah. And so get down to St Kilda and support those little bars and places. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Back.
I think so. Back. And how are you feeling? I mean, you said you're feeling much better now, but I guess, are you feeling a bit out of practice socially, or how are you feeling? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Socially, no, I'm fine. But what really gave me a shock was how out of practice I was on my instrument.
Yeah.
It's more the physical side of things. So, so playing a wind instrument, there are muscles in your face that you don't normally use, and not having played the amount of time over the last month, 6 months or so. It's like really falling apart by the end of a third set. So it's better now. But I was really shocked. It's the type of thing that happens to students. They get too tired to play.
And it's happening to the teacher and the master. And someone that's been playing for so long. But that's actually really good information to give to your students, actually. Use it or
Well,
lose
it
it.
is.
Yeah.
One of the people I work with plays French horn in an orchestra, and he was saying exactly the same thing, that they're finding all the wind players are really struggling physically. The physical advantage, and even some of the string players, like the double bass players, the strength in their hands just isn't there.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's another little COVID fallout, isn't it? I reckon there's just so much going on these different levels and layers. So it'd be good if someone could do a bit of a research project on that. So how do you think you'd feel, Steve, if you were told we're about to go into another lockdown, maybe next year, March or so? How do you think? What's the initial feeling you get right now in your body and your mind?
I reckon I'd be better prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and one, we know what to expect, and I think one of the hardest things was that we had no idea that anything was going to get better. We sort of now know what works, and it's so fragile. Do you remember when things were getting really, really good, and they sort of announced the timeline of how we were going to open up, and what sort of things were going to happen, and then all of a sudden there was a minor outbreak of seven cases, and it looked like, oh no, we've done all of this and it just didn't work. That's, and I'm so glad that that was just a glitch in. We know it works, so, and we'd also be aware, we'd have sort of a warning in that you'd know the type of outbreaks that would happen that would trigger another lockdown. I really, really, really hope it doesn't happen, but I think I'll be better prepared, and we know the sort of timeline that it's going to be. And the dangers. Don't just watch television and drink beer.
Maybe some of the practices that we do to get through would change.
I reckon I'd be look. There's no way of knowing. But I'd rather be in a lockdown than be in a situation like England or America.
Sure. Yeah, got it. And so, you're more concerned with the fact that we should just properly lock down. We'd be more prepared. If we properly lock down, it'll be a shorter space of time that we need to do it for, and we can maybe adapt a little bit better, and hope that all of those fallout elements, for example, with work and your particular area, which is the art scene and music scene, wouldn't suffer for too long. Well, I definitely hope that the summer brings many gigs and many opportunities for you to play music and for people to get out and enjoy those venues again and stuff like that. My final question for you today, Steve, is, was there a particular image or dream, or even perhaps it's genre of music or album that you kind of went to during the lockdowns, or that was a recurring image or feeling that you had or felt drawn to?
Not, I don't think so. I did a lot more list making.
Lists. Okay. Yes. Getting organised.
So what we'd have, usually planning the week ahead, sort of, and what I was going to have for dinner. This little exercise area out the back, I've written up about 3 or 4 different programs. I choose which one I was going to do for each day. Those sort of things. I liked all the movies that were that's on SBS. I watched a lot of movies. And the thing that got me the most was when there are no rules in terms of when you go to bed. It'd be 4 or 5 in the morning. I go, oh, Joe, you should go to bed, and then I could sleep for 12 hours. And so that was okay. That's almost my natural body clock. And there was a time, I think in the 80s, when that's how I lived, because most of that we did, like rock bands and things like that. You do your main set maybe at midnight or 1 a.m. and then that's it. My daughter's, when she was at kindergarten, she's going, "Can my friend come over?" Yeah, of course. She comes over and turns out her best friend in primary school, it was primary school, her best friend in primary school, her aunties are Vicar and Linda, two session singers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, oh, really? That's strange. Okay. It's like,
nice.
and I did, okay. So, and we caught up at a birthday party for the first time since all the chaos of the 80s and 90s. And we worked out that the last time we spoke to each other was 5 a.m. at a nightclub when it was perfectly normal for us to be out at 5 a.m. at a nightclub.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just what you did.
Yeah, that's it.
And then here we were at some fairy tree little girl birthday party sort of thing.
Vicar and Linda
on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, I know what different hats we wear at times, isn't it? Vicar and Linda Bull are fantastic singers, aren't they? They did a lot of stuff in the 90s and the 80s, I remember.
And they're still
going.
Doing a lot of touring. Yeah. So it's and they're fantastic. They're just doing their own music, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope to see them out there in the scene. But yeah, I think that's really valid. That sort of commentary that you were just making on the strange, surreal sleep patterns that you get into, particularly if you are not looking after young children, and you don't have to get up in the morning for anyone to take care of anyone. What a strange time. And as you trickle back into sort of normal life again, I really hope that, your needs are met with music and your needs are met with community and connection, and that the scene just keeps opening up more and more for you, and that people can go along and enjoy those things again. Because I know with my 18-year-old, I've got an 18-year-old actually who turned 18 this year. She had her last year of school this year.
Oh wow.
And so none of those usual rites of passage, like no 18th birthday parties, no clubbing. When you turn 18, normally you go, I'll have a big party, or I'll go out to a nightclub. Well, clubs, I think they've only just started opening now in the last week. I think there was an announcement or two. So nightclubs are now allowed to operate at the end of this COVID year. So, it's an interesting thing that all those rites of passage that we did, potential travel overseas, all of those things have not been necessarily on the cards for this current generation. And that's a sense of unknown for them. So, interesting to hear what you used to get up to and maybe even still do when things are normal.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for your time today. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk to a musician who was greatly affected by the lockdown and the restrictions because of COVID-19, and also a teacher, and how that actually looks for teaching via Zoom, which is really difficult. And just your candid and honest opinions about the whole lockdown situation. So thank you so much for your participation in the series.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really, really good. Thanks.
No worries. All the best for everything too.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Lockdown, Stories from Inside. I hope you've enjoyed this interview and it's provided you with plenty of food for thought and the opportunity to expand your understanding of the breadth of human experience. Thank you for lending your ears as we walked a mile in someone else's shoes. See you next time.